Hello, this is Alan Zundell for Social Advance, and I have with me my friends Randy Prince and Charles Dunaway, and we're going to take a look back at this terrible, horrible year that just ended. And among the many important events, the little less important event is that this will be the last video from Social Advance. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We're disbanding the organization Social Advance. We kind of stopped doing the weekly videos a while back, about a half a year ago, and maybe do a retrospective on what we've learned from this, if anything, and the other events of the year. So let me ask you guys, first of all, when you got involved in this video project, what were you attracted to? What did you hope to accomplish? And do you think we accomplished anything?
I was hoping to stay in touch with something local uh, and national that brings me back to days at this university. I liked political science and history, and the chance to apply it here by following news events and being part of this team has been very rewarding for me. It's very satisfying.
I think I really liked the general idea of social advance, the initial concept. I was very impressed with that. I thought that was a good solution to our partisan problem here. And of course the videos were very interesting for me because being new to Oregon, I was getting a real elementary lesson on Oregon politics, which I knew nothing about beforehand, but that was really helpful to me.
We should give the viewers a background on what Social Advance was about, at least a short intro on that. The general idea was being frustrated with the party system, hard to make any kind of dent in the Democratic Party, and if you get involved in a alternative party, you don't make a dent in the elections or the voters' minds very much. So it was the attempt to create an organization that would bring people together from different parties, which we actually did. A handful of us that got involved in this, I think at our peak, maybe 10 or so people. We had non-affiliated and Democratic and Green voters, at least. I'm not sure of everybody's party affiliation, but just could not build much. The idea of the videos was to, make people aware of our presence and also educate people on Oregon politics and the elections here so that they could maybe vote in a better informed fashion. And I have to say for myself too, doing the videos, especially the first year there in 2019, trying to follow the state legislature and put up videos from them was a worthwhile experience for me. Not only did I learn more about how to use editing software for the videos, which is a hell of a lot of work, but I learned a lot about the Oregon politics. I knew a little bit about it, tried to follow it, but when you actually see the people in the state legislature debating with each other, you get to get a sense of who these people are, where they're from, how they think about things.
Sometimes though in the Oregon legislature, they don't stay in the building. They're out running around the Capitol in trucks, but but yeah, that was an interesting year there.
Well, it happened early this year too. It happened last year and happened this year. We started off the year with what was supposed to be a short session in the legislature. And I'm kind of disappointed we never got beyond covering the legislature, but with the three of us, it wasn't easy to pull together information on what's going on around the state. But they had a real short session. They finished before they got much done this year, as they did last year. And that's even before the pandemic started. So not a good year for the legislature.
I think this was an example of party politics, the kind of partisanship that is obsolete and caused a lot of dysfunctionality. I remember somebody describing the aspects of politics. You've got the personality, the individual that runs for office, or that is the basis of the appeal, the candidate. You've got then also allegiance to a party, and that's our group. And then there are issues and principles, things that people can agree on and work out. we've sort of strived to put more emphasis on the issues that will transcend the party lines. Um, Even though it's very encouraging to be part of a group, and I mean at the grassroots organizing level as well as the major political parties in Salem, it doesn't always bring the best results. And the legislature really did not work so well because it was a system of alliances enforced on both sides, a kind of, you're in us or you're not. And it didn't, to us, to me, most people, I don't think we saw anything they were able to agree on a common good, like let's all preserve the environment more, or let's make sure everybody has basic income. This is highlighted in the current discussion over the stimulus payments nationally. Where are the party alliances? It just broke down. The system broke down there, and in Oregon, the legislative walkout showed how things were not resolvable.
Yeah, and I think here in Oregon, the polarization between the parties and the infighting, between the parties is really driven more by the national political scene than it is by anything here. I mean, there are some issues over which people here get very riled up and have different opinions, timber management, for example. But a lot of this was just about Republicans don't like anything Democrats do, and Democrats don't like anything Republicans do.
And beyond that, it was kind of eye-opening for me to follow the state legislative elections and see how predictable they all were. So not a lot of excitement about who's going to win in almost all the districts. There's a few that are close races between the parties, but most of them are not that close. It's kind of predictable. And nobody outside the two parties is going to win it all. The Democrats are going to dominate the legislature. So everything is like, you can tell the outcome in advance, aside from a few seats here and there. Makes elections seem not as interesting for an organization like ours trying to work across party lines. It's like, well, how are we going to influence elections at all when people are more attached to parties, particularly elected officials, more attached to parties that can't cooperate?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the problem. We're in an electoral system that's in such flux. At least we're ahead of it and seeing that the party lines as driven right now aren't really a functional tool, this political system. And things are changing. The Republican Party is the subject of a lot of debate. Will there be one? Of course, the relationship between the Republican Party and at the national level and the state level. And this Oregon's had a lot of Republicans statewide, but not now. And I think that people aren't really considering how those things are shifting. One thing on the voter reform debate, let's maybe get a different voting system in, ranked choice voting versus score voting, or there were previously raised more simple reforms like top two primaries in Washington, Oregon. Sometimes the discussion presumes that political parties will remain the same on the same ideological lines. Like, ranked choice voting, its main advantage over star voting, a different alternative, is it keeps the minor parties going. Well, what if we didn't have this distinction so clear between the two main parties and the marginalized lesser parties?
I think you meant the difference between ranked choice voting in our current system.
Yeah, proportional representation, all of these issues aren't really thought about enough when it comes to the reform proposals. We certainly get a lot of participation, a lot of people voting, and vote by mail. Oregon's been a leader. So it's up to us and other people who want to see change to make sure we point to that. The election system doesn't work to bring out good candidates, good choices.
So it makes the primaries more important.
Yeah.
Because that's where you have the opportunity to make a change, at least until we get a different kind of voting system in place. And there's all this pressure due to the voting system to maintain two parties, even though both parties seem to be cracking at the seams with the whole Bernie Sanders progressive movement versus the centrist Democrats on one side, and then the Trump Republicans against the Republicans that are kind of sick of Trump along with the
Right,
rest of us.
right. Both major
Yeah.
parties are cleaving apart, and everything's in flux, or it could be. And our voting systems, they everybody wants choice. Lane County, that proposal, the basically untested star voting system, came within just a couple percentage points as a grassroots effort is being raised.
Well, we still have a chance there. Might be on the ballot next year, depending on a judge's decision.
Yeah, I think something like that, star voting, some kind of ranked choice or preferential voting, is the only answer here. And I would love to see Oregon pioneer a new innovation of not permitting parties to be on the ballot. No parties. Just have a bunch of people run,
I favor
and
that.
they would have to articulate what the heck they're for and against, without just putting a donkey or an elephant in front of their name.
Yeah, parties could get together and endorse people like any other organization. Why do they need to have access to the ballot? That contradicts the early founders of the nation that we always talk about honoring the founders. Well, they didn't like political parties, even though they invented them. But they didn't like it. They thought once my party wins, then everybody be happy. It didn't work out that way.
No.
So what else can we talk about this year? There's the pandemic. There was the presidential election. We still don't know where things are headed going into the new year. We don't know if Mr. Trump is going to barricade himself in the White House. We don't know if this current surge of the pandemic is going to subside or just get worse as people travel for Christmas. No idea what this new year is going to bring. I mean, can always be wrong, but this time I have no idea.
I think this year demonstrated a big important thing to look at is the matchup of our knowledge of public affairs and the actual situation. By the time we figure out what's going on, it's already changed. But at the popular level, there's a lot of information among the masses of people who get news and are electronically connected through their phones. They may not read the paper, but they're saturated with lots of information. But the knowledge of how to manage that and to know what's reputable information, it's not up to it. Things change fast, and with what they learned in school doesn't prepare people to really avoid information overload or confusion in the face of disinformation. But also at the elite level too, we don't really know. All of this old conventions don't seem to match up, like don't go into debt too much, or if we had high unemployment, the stock market would drop. Regular things have been not panning out like we would expect at the level of the economic management.
Confusion reigns.
Yeah. I think we've seen, I think we're coming to the end of when our liberal democracy idea and our economic system that is tied to it, I think the time's running out on it. I don't think we've got, our response to the COVID thing was really indicative. I mean, here we are, we've got the worst, the highest number of deaths in the world for this by a large margin, and other countries that we look down our nose at as being, authoritarian or somehow badly managed, did really well. I mean, had very few cases. So, there's something wrong there. And I think we've also got to a point where our political system is dominated by money, not by people. So, and that's been true for a while, but I mean, it's gotten to a point where, the media is out to make a buck, and, the way they do it is pushing the hate of the other side. And so we get not only different views on the particular issue, we get completely different facts on the issue. And the facts that one side says are true, the other side says are bogus, and vice versa. That's really not I don't see how you run a country like that. There's no faith in the media. There's no faith in the political system.
And eroding faith in capitalism, you see more and more people willing to consider some variant of socialism,
Mhm.
even though the right continues to demonize the very phrase, as though anyone that mentions the dreaded word is out to create a gulag and send people for
I,
re-education.
I'd say that anti-socialist rhetoric is an example of this mismatch of the knowledge and the time. So it just seemed to fall flat to me, except for in Florida, apparently it roused a bunch of energy because of Cuba's experience with socialism being so recent. But to go into that McCarthyist rhetoric, to me, it showed like the Republicans that were behind that were just out of touch. They were no longer, they didn't have their finger on the pulse.
Mhm. Well, the other side of that is that the Democrats basically spent 5 years running against Trump, the person. Trump is a liar. Trump is a cheat. Trump is a gangster. Trump is whatever. And, he's stupid, whatever you want to say. And anybody who supports him is an idiot, deplorable, whatever you want to call it. And I don't necessarily disagree with all that, but it's a damn poor strategy for getting voters. It's really not good. You can't yell at people and tell them they're racist and ignorant, and then but would you give me your vote?
Well, but that appeals, that kind of information appeals to the voter. With their attention span on the media that they receive information to say, hey, look, this guy is a no good person, or something.
Yeah.
And show him acting like a buffoon on TV. Okay, you communicated in a few seconds. What's the alternative? You're going to say 99 out of 100 university professors have studied this program that Trump proposed, and it's a bunch of bunk and shows that he's not a good leader. People want that. They want that reality TV type of immediacy.
Oh yeah.
Well, once again, we have a presidential race, probably a lot of other races, where people are voting against rather than voting for.
Mm-hmm.
People voted for Biden because they were against Trump. People voted for Trump because they are against Biden and the Democratic Party. And not as many people, I don't even know how many people are left that are voting for something, a positive vision.
In reality TV, at the end of the show, you always vote who to get rid of. Who's left standing,
Good point.
We are following the reality TV show script.
Yeah, we kicked Trump off the island.
Yeah, we did.
He's not off yet, though. He's not playing by the rules.
No.
Yeah.
He's being a good villain. He's keeping people's attention, at least to some degree.
Hmm.
So going forward, right, this experiment in trying to bring people together across party lines has faltered, partially due to the fact that it's hard to do anything in a pandemic, but I think also was party ties and political personalities and things like that make people more activated than some vision of let's all get along and try to figure out where our common ground is. I don't think that's quite what we were doing. We were trying to find something we believe in that other people might find attractive. But where do we go from here? What are we all going to go back to the Democratic Party or the Green Party or wherever? Give up entirely?
There's plenty of room for more issues to be developed, more solutions to be championed that will appeal across party lines. And we're just not getting them out of any of those existing organizations, the political parties. So there's some issues have already been worked through and maybe are tired to get back into, like the carbon pricing approach. There should be a solution available that appeals to all those in the legislature and the people, but it's not come about. Maybe it's been worked over too much, or maybe we're right for that. But there are other social problems that, such as the guaranteed income, the basic income, that solutions could emerge better outside of a party's own bubble.
So you think in this single issue approach, Find an issue you like and promote that.
I think so. I think developing an answer to a problem that there's a solution available, like at a state level, something that can make a difference. You actually might win. You might get some reforms. That the development of that solution, the collaboration between people of different views, that you just pick up the phone or email somebody and say, look, do you want to participate in a campaign for this kind of a solution, like or a basic income thing? Some aspects could be done at the state level.
Or the Oregon People's Rebate here.
That's right, that kind of a proposal. Other things concerning housing that have a big view of what the problem is and how to develop a solution in the Oregon context to avoid that.
Yeah, I think the problem with that, for the most part, is that the people who have those great ideas and go into a primary campaign, obviously, because that's where you have to go first, are invariably opposed by the party's establishment. And the party establishment has plenty of money, and they'll line up all of their stars to back the party's candidate. It's really difficult, I think, for someone with a different new idea to break through in a primary, either side really, and go on to run for the office.
Well, how much of a strain can our political system take between people wanting more out of the government or wanting something different out of the government and the government resisting that because the party establishment on each side is just hanging on to their, the agenda that's given to them by their funders, essentially. How do the people's voice break through this system? It looks like it's breaking through by people picking up arms and descending on the state capitol. Happened here, happened in Michigan.
Yep.
Probably going to happen in other places.
Mm-hmm.
Are they all going to give up come inauguration day? Or is there going to be an outbreak of violence?
I think we are in for a very long, rocky road here. I don't see the Trump, fanatic Trump people and the QAnon people and all them just like rolling over and, starting to watch more football. I mean, they're going to be out there challenging in whatever way they can. And, that might be violent.
It's a good question what we're going to do about the fascist bands that are left over from the re-elect Trump era. I mean, traditionally, most opponents of fascism in the 30s saying, you have to stand strong, resist, show your force, that they will not be able to overcome you just by arms and intimidation. But I don't know whether we're at an earlier stage there. We don't have a national party really connecting all of these groups. And when you approach individuals who are in a group like that, they will respond to discussion of what's fair and just, and they can still be diverted away from a us versus them QAnon type of mentality.
Well, let's remember, it's not just the so-called right wing. It's also here in Oregon, especially, you got the anarchists. They've a couple of times this year they took over neighborhoods in Portland. The first time was during the protest, the Black Lives Matters protest, and more recently, they took over a neighborhood to try to stop an eviction. And in fact, they stopped it. So they took charge, picked up guns, had a perimeter, and determined who could come and go, threw things at the police, chased them away. So we have our anarchists establishing their own zones of control, at least temporarily.
Yeah, and every time they do that, or there's any other kind of glass breaking or whatever, the Republicans, associate that with the Democrats. This is part of these Democrats, radical left. There's AOC and the anarchists who blew up a street. I mean, really. I mean, they just try to throw everything together to attack Democrats.
And Joe Biden's behind it all.
Yeah, it's as frightening to their audience as the picture of the armed men invading the state capitol during a legislative session is to us. You know, we don't want to see the places that are safe for civil discussion, like a capitol or a city hall or something, be invaded by people whose guns are more of a statement than anything they're really proposing for the politics. Well, the same scariness is out there for people. Hey, anarchists are going to come take over your neighborhood, and you who happen to be living there are going to be tremendously inconvenienced or threatened for your life, and so on. They had all kinds of stories planted, but there is an invasiveness to setting up a liberated zone in the middle of a city and bringing on a standoff with police. And so
both sides really scare me to some degree, maybe not in the same way. What I'd really like to see is some kind of mass-based, nonviolent protest movement. But what's the rallying cry? I'm not sure. What exactly would it form around at this point?
In the movement here in Oregon in the 80s around Old Growth Forest Preservation, most of the groups, just without much dissension, well, there was some, but adopted principles of nonviolence that were used in the civil rights movement, and were not shy to quote Martin Luther King or Gandhi. The other people who went for a more militant type of resistance, Earth First, the Echo Warriors, they still didn't endorse violence against other people, mostly just property.
And now a lot of those people are in prison for long, long sentences because they got tagged as terrorists.
That's true. But the problem now is that the allegiance with the tradition of the civil rights movement, the pacifist side of that, is weaker, and the alternative of resistance is addressing the person-to-person the tradition of the 30s, and that you should fight the fascists physically. You should not back down to their force. So,
and a lot of organizing goes on in smaller cells rather than trying to build a mass movement.
Yeah. Well, and part of this, I think, to come back to this idea of what would a movement have to come around? It seems to me that there's a tremendous possibility of a movement against the things that both parties are for and for the things that both parties are against. For example, both parties really are against Medicare for all. Both parties are against student loan forgiveness. Both parties are for enormous expenditures on the military. So there are enough issues that could bring people around. But the problem is that all of those issues get sucked into the Democratic Party and die.
Die.
They die. It's where good ideas. Yeah, they do.
So it looks like our time is starting to run short. Any final thoughts? One thing I do want to say is I want to keep doing videos in some format. They won't be under the name of Social Advance, but I'm not sure exactly what format. So pay attention. I'll go forward in some way coming into the new year. How about you guys? What's your plans for the New Year's other than trying to stay alive?
Well, we're adapting. We're going to have to adapt to this pandemic circumstance, not just staying alive. I'm worried about my job and when can I get a vaccination? I meet the public on my job. I think everybody's worried about that. But our political community engagement, it's virtual now, and it's probably going to stay that way for a long time. So what's the best format? What's the best time of day to have a show when you're talkative and coherent is relevant to me. How do we all stay connected and get our technology and expectations.
Maybe a live show would be a good idea. Huh?
There's streaming, and the world has changed. It used to
Mm.
be kind of like you got your work or your school, and then so many meetings a week of groups you might want to participate in, or activities, music, and things.
Yeah.
And now we're totally in control of the events.
Yeah,
Charles?
I think streaming is a great idea when you can do it, but of course you can't edit streaming. It's out there. Whatever you said, however, whatever you scratched, it's out there, you know, for them to see. So, but yeah, I don't know. I'm going to continue trying to do my podcast if I can, uh, but that's about all. And I'm going to keep observing the scene.
A wider view. Let's plug your
Yes.
podcast.
Wider view. Yes.
And you may be able to find it if he keeps going forward, right?
Yes. You may be still there.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot for getting together last time this year. Maybe we'll find a way to get together again next year.
Thank you, Alan.
Good.
Well,
Yeah. Thanks.
It's been fun. At least it was at the first year and a half or so. That got really hard. It was a slog in the middle of this year. So we'll see how this all reincarnates. All right. So,
All right.
so long,
Great.
and thank you all for watching once again. Hope to see you later.